this meeting of the Troy Planning Commission, a special meeting regarding design workshop for the multimodal transit center facility. To start off with, the Planning Commission is the recommending body for this item this evening. So you're going to see and hear a presentation, and we have the opportunity to provide input on the design that is presented this evening. Again, we are a recommending body. This is not a formal site plan review of any kind, but just a workshop in which we have the opportunity for input. Also, I want to mention this is the last time we will see this. We have this opportunity this evening to comment on design as a planning commission, and then we'll move on from here. Obviously, as individual citizens in Troy, you will have continued opportunity to have comment. As far as the planning commission is concerned, this evening is for the design workshop. We'll make our comments, and later we'll move on from here. So, with that, can we call the roll, please?
I'll do it, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Evans.
Here.
Mr. Hudson.
Here.
Mr. Krant.
Here.
Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Mr. Sanzika.
Here.
Mr. Shepke.
Here.
Mr. Schultz. Mr. Stratt.
Here.
Mr. Tagle.
Here.
All right, we have a quorum. Brian, you going to lead off the presentation?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I put together a riveting PowerPoint presentation. And my intent is really to very, very briefly summarize, catch everyone up to speed on the background for this project. And I think the best way to do that is with some milestone events and some milestone dates. So I'm gonna go through these fairly quickly. We'll introduce the design team later on, but if there are any questions related to some of these events, feel free to ask. But again, my intent is to go through these relatively quickly. So the first notable recent event, it was September 20, 2010. City Council granted preliminary site plan approval for the multimodal transit center. You will remember that the council granted approval with conditions. And one of the condition was that we have a design workshop in the future, which is obviously this evening. And the intent of the design workshop was to discuss and incorporate further design enhancements into the plans, with the intent being to improve aesthetics and functionality of the project. And I'm not going to list those now. It's on a slide later on in my presentation. And what you will remember, the transit center, it was a joint project with the city of Birmingham. The planning board had granted preliminary site plan approval at an earlier date, and you'll remember this number, $8.5 million roughly. That was the total project cost based on the FRA grant award, approximately $8.5 million. April 2011, City of Birmingham withdrew from the project. They were unable to acquire property on the west side of the tracks, and because the property could not be acquired and Birmingham dropped out, there was not sufficient room to place a tunnel entirely within the right-of-way. So that led to we had to contemplate some alternative design solutions to that problem. August 2011, the scope changed during the environmental assessment process with the FRA. There were a number of alternative solutions that were vetted during the AA process, and what we came up with was to add a bridge over the tracks to connect the platform with the Troy side. During this process, it was determined that the platform had to be on the Birmingham side, and we had to get people across either over the tracks, either above the tracks at grade or below the tracks. Below obviously wasn't an option because there wasn't enough property. At grade wasn't an option because CN would not approve that, so we had to go over the tracks with a bridge. September 12, 2011, City Council approved the MDOT capital contract for $8.5 million with the specific purpose of designing and building the transit center at no cost to the City of Troy. September 15, 2011, you'll notice we're about a year on from when council first granted preliminary site plan approval. Finding of no significant impact, or FONSI, This is a critical step for federally funded projects. Basically, there was a determination, made by the FRA, or the Federal Railroad Administration, that the transit center would have no foreseeable significant impact on the quality of the environment. October 1st, 2011, a capital contract was executed with MDOT to use the FRA funds to complete the transit center project, and with the understanding it had to be completed within 2 years, which the clock started ticking, and it had to be completed by October 1st of 2013 at that time. December 19th, 2011, this went before City Council to approve the contract for A&E Design Services, and it failed. They did not get the approval at that meeting. The selected firm that was before council that evening was HRC and their design team, which included Newman Smith Architects and Grissom Metz Andres, which is a landscape architecture firm. In their proposal, there was a number of renderings. What they did was they took these 6 design initiatives that were suggested by Planning Commission and incorporated in the resolution of City Council, and they addressed those Planning Commission concerns and City Council concerns in renderings in the proposal. It was very effective and very helpful. And that's something that became very important later on, because on January 17th, 2012, City Council approved the contract for AE services with HRC. Now, prior to going before City Council, these renderings I mentioned just a second ago, they were used. City Council was concerned with the price, $8.5 million. They wanted that price lower, and they wanted assistance from HRC and their design team to come up with a design solution at less cost, specifically over $2 million less cost. So those renderings that were included as part of the proposal were used to show design intent and to show some examples of what the project could look like at less cost, with removing some amenities from the site. And the design team will get into those at a later date. I'm trying to speed through this. February 20th, 2012, City Council approved the Construction Manager at Risk, or the CMR. And basically it's a CMR's job to ensure that the construction is completed on time and under budget. And then finally, on March 14th, 2012, the notice to proceed was issued by the city to the HRC design team, including Newman Smith. So once they had the notice to proceed, that triggered our design workshop, which is why we're here this evening, and which brings us to the intent of the meeting. Again, I want to get through this fairly quickly. Some points to consider, just to keep in the back of your mind while we go through this exercise this evening. This is the Planning Commission's one and only chance to have design input into this project for various reasons, the most important of which, the clock is ticking. We have to get this done. The project cost and the project scope have been reduced. The total project cost is now approximately $6.2 million. That's for total cost, including contingencies, I believe, and the construction cost is about $4.2 million. So it's been significantly reduced. The scope has been significantly reduced. And I want to, when I say that this is the Planning Commission's one opportunity to have input on this, this is not a negative. We're at the ground floor, and I want to stress that these illustrations, these conceptual illustrations that were provided, they reflect design intent. These are not finished site plans, okay? We're at the starting point. This gives us a great idea of what the vision of the design intent for the site is based on HRC and their design team. But the Planning Commission is in at the ground floor of this. The site plan has not been completed. This is opportunity at ground zero to have input and to move this project forward. So it's really not, when I say it's your one chance, it's not a threat or a negative, it's a positive, okay? We're in at the beginning here. Again, the color renderings are intended to communicate design intent. And the focus of the Planning Commission this evening, I want to bring you back to the 6 design enhancements. And I'll just go through those really quickly before I pass this on. 1, building facade articulation. 2, a more identifiable building entrance. 3, enhancing the sense of arrival by focusing on a major point of interest. 4, establishing visual interest with human scale elements in the building. 5, creating transitional features between the building, the bridge structure, and the platform. And finally, the 6th point, offering additional cost-effective, sustainable design features. And what I'm going to do now, we're going to open up the next PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to hand it over to Mike McDonald from HRC. He's going to introduce the design team and then go over the project.
Thank you, Brent. Again, my name is Mike McDonald with Hubble, Roth & Clark. I've been involved in the project here with HRC beginning in about February of 2009 during the preliminary phase of the project as we took over from the previous firm who did some of the preliminary design work. So we've had a great deal of background in the project and knowing how the project got to this point. So I'd like to touch on introducing our project team that's with us here tonight and provide a few additional background points that we'd like to mention before moving into the exciting part and talking about the design concept renderings we have here before you tonight. So I would be the project manager, or will be the project manager for all of the design and construction efforts that our consultant team will be involved in. I have here with me here tonight Wally Alex, who's our principal here at HRC. He works with the city on all of our projects with the city and would be involved in the overall oversight of all aspects of our work on the project. We have Jim Surhai here in the front row. He will be the project engineer for all of our civil and site work on the project. Teaming with us for the architectural components of the project is Newman Smith Architecture here. And we have Mike Kirk, who's a principal with the firm. He will be overseeing all of the design on the architectural aspect of the building and as well as the site in general, and then providing the railway facility architect on the project too. And with them here tonight again from Newman Smith is Scott Bonney. He'll be the lead project architect for all of the day-to-day design efforts throughout the project. We also have on our team Rich Hodek from Grissom Metz Andrews in the back. He will be the lead landscape architecture for all of the site amenities and landscaping that will be included in the project. Also with us tonight is a continuation of the team effort, the city's CMR. We have Alan Blower from Tools Clark team and Don Rogers from Tools Clark. They'll be working closely with the city and ourselves during the design and construction of the project throughout the duration of the project. And again, just as a further background, again, HRC has been involved in the project as well as a couple of other team members that aren't with us tonight. We've been involved since about February of 2009, right up through the City Council approval in 2010 to gain the Planning Commission recommendation and the City Council approval. And then as the cities went forward trying to secure the grant funding and get the environmental assessment and things approved, our work kind of suspended for a time. We were involved with city staff in coming up with some of the real preliminary site modifications when Birmingham backed out to show the pedestrian bridge over the railroad tracks and the elevators on each side of the tracks to gain access to the platform on the Birmingham side. So we were involved in those type of things as well so that they could gain the final Federal Rail Administration approval for the modifications to the project. So knowing that, when we put together our proposal for the project, we had all that background, and as Brent mentioned, we took the design recommendations that City Council required that were covered in this workshop, along with knowing the background of the revision that the site had with the removal of the tunnel and the addition of the pedestrian bridge, knowing what type of things that needed to be changed to better incorporate those items into the project, as well as what items of the site needed to remain the same, those that couldn't be changed, for instance, the parking lot and Doyle Drive and those type of items. So we were able to take all of those items, work with our team, and prepare the concepts that were ultimately submitted with the proposal. And as Brent mentioned, those were for the $8.5 million design budget that was the original intent of the project. And during the month of mid-December to middle of January, when council was considering the reduced project, we worked with the city as a team again and developed these concept sketches that we have here before you and are included in your packet. So what we have shown here does reflect the just under $6.3 million project or budget that the project does need to follow. So With that, I'd like to turn it over to Mike and Scott to go into a little further detail on our concept sketches.
Thanks, Mike.
Well, we're excited about being here and kicking this project off with you folks tonight. I'm going to run through some of the diagrams that were part of our submittal with our RFP response, and then Scott will review with you the actual building design concepts that we showed you. Here's just an overview of the site in the context of the greater community, showing downtown Birmingham to the west, Somerset Collection to the east, the shopping mall directly to the east of the site, then showing it in context in its direct neighborhood with the approach drives on Doyle, its proximity to the shopping center, and the views across the tracks to the Birmingham side. We've also included a time schedule from the trains, because we note when the trains are both arriving and departing from Troy, as that information should inform our design process. And then once again, the 6 key ideas that we're going to review with you tonight: the articulation of the building facade. This was relative to the design you had when you initially approved it in 2010. Then the identifiable building entrance needed to be improved. We wanted to create a great sense of arrival. We wanted to introduce visual interests through key human scale elements, use the plaza, the area between, and then the building itself to create a transition from the building over to the platform on the other side of the rail, and finally incorporate cost-effective, sustainable design features where we can. The first diagram we showed with our submittal was this one, which in the upper left corner shows you where the original station was shown before the RFP process. In the lower right corner, we're showing that station location shifting to the north because we believe it was important to get a close proximity between the drop-off and the parking area to the actual station itself. The second diagram we showed talked about the fact that in the original layout, part of the support areas of the building, toilets, mechanical space, etc., where letter A shows up on that diagram, and tended to block the views to the trains as they went south from the station. And where item B is on the diagram, the linear stairs that were developed at that point tended to obscure the views to the north. And then on the back side of the station at C and D, there were really rather open views to the loading dock area of the mall. And so our hope was that we would change that orientation, and in the upper left, showing the 2B locations, get the waiting area so that you would get the long views north and south on the tracks, and where A is, use the support areas of the building to screen the views to the loading dock, and finally where C is, use this closer proximity of the building to the drop-off area to create a welcoming plaza and a very strong single identity for entrance, and that's illustrated there. In the lower right-hand corner, we did look briefly at making the station building parallel with the tracks, and what we concluded there was, because of the elevation of the rail above the surrounding topography, that if the waiting area was parallel with the tracks, you really wouldn't get views of the train because you'd be looking into the side of the ballasted area for the tracks. So then when you put all of these things together, we came up with our recommendation that the building be simplified, would then have a bridge over the tracks to the platform. The approach area where item B is shown would have strong identity and establish a very pleasing, welcoming plaza. And where D is in the lower right, that there would be safe travel from both bus patrons as well as people parking their cars to get across Doyle Drive, being able to look in both directions and go through the plaza to the station. And then our final diagram here just looks in detail at the station itself And on the left, the original approach with that support area, item D, on the upper part of the plan, which is to the south, and the waiting area wrapping around to the north and to the east. And then in the revised diagram on the right side, we place the waiting area H near the track so you can look to the north and south and see those long views with the trains coming and going, and use the support spaces J to screen the views to the loading dock area of the shopping mall. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Scott to walk you through the building.
Hello again, I'm Scott Bonney from Newman Smith, project designer. Let me turn this up a little bit.
So it doesn't amplify, it's just for the video.
Okay.
At home.
Just a couple points. When we did these drawings, the building was considerably larger, so the next set of drawings you're going to see, we've reduced the scale of the project. And then you can see on the figure on the right, one of the key design elements is to create a singular entrance for the building, essentially a lobby where the letter G is shown there, with the hope that that unifies the building and gives people an understanding of how this building functions. It becomes a very clear, self-evident to the building. On the other scheme, you wouldn't know, do I go into A, do I go into F, you know, where do I come in? One of the challenges of this building, of course, is in its operation, it needs to be a secure facility that can be locked at night. But when somebody arrives from a train at 1 o'clock in the morning from Chicago, they're going to need to exit the train, use the bridge and elevator, come across, but then come down from the building. So we need to have a zone. So in theory, that area labeled G needs to be open at all times and secure separately from the lobby of H and the support of I over there. Again, we thought that the stair that was originally drawn at E could be much more economically constructed if we keep it as a tower as opposed to a cascading stair. It was easier to make waterproof and more compact and allowed views around it. And we thought it made a more iconic feeling, a vertical design element that you would see as a sort of a tower element as opposed to a cascade. So let me just take you through a few last items we had in our proposal. The top A through E are some of the buildings that we've done in the past couple of years where we try to create an iconic image for our clients. Some of them are traditional, some of them are modern. Project C there is in Birmingham. We did a project for Livonia Parks and Rec where we have iconic elements that really make the building memorable. And we think Troy is filled with memorable buildings, and we want to make sure that this project, you know, is something that the city is proud of, that people realize there's someplace special when they arrive or depart from the city. G, H, and I there describe just a series of typologies for our architecture. G is actually a traditional train station. A lot of these train stations are, in fact, very traditional in nature, and some of them, you know, pretend, even new ones, pretend to be very old-fashioned kind of buildings. We're not sure that's the right solution for Troy. Well, obviously, H there describes the shopping center that this project is part of, and we thought that should inform the design, that there should be some continuity. And we thought perhaps using similar brick colors would be one way to do that. And obviously, I across the bottom are some very important buildings in Troy, from Somerset Mall all the way to your new high school, and some important towers. We think important, iconic buildings that we want to try to do when we create this facility. So let me walk you through. This is one aerial that we've used. We've annotated it, and it's been kind of a popular drawing to kind of understand it. Clearly, this isn't the way that anybody perceives the project except maybe the helicopter pilots, but it does help us understand sort of a site plan and some of the vertical massing at the same time. You know, clearly the bus drop-off on Doyle Drive is kind of a given. We didn't really have a chance to mess around with that. In fact, we simplified it. We're using the existing road now, and we're going to replace the pavement, but we're just going to widen it for a place for the buses to drop off. And we'll have 2 spaces for buses on each side and some form of a shelter that would be in the sidewalk area there. The existing parking lot to the north will remain essentially, and the southern portion of that would be a spot where taxi cabs could wait and queue up. And then on the other side, of course, becomes the plaza to the main project. And one of the most important things is the crossing of Doyle Drive. And we looked carefully at the stuff that had gone before us and how pedestrians were intended to get from the parking to the plaza. And clearly there needs to be some demarcated areas. And one of the challenges, of course, is on a curve. You can't really just go straight as the crow flies across the sidewalk. You really want to make sure that you cross that walk in a way that you can see both ways, left and right, and you know, pedestrians are visible from people turning that corner. And then, of course, once you get to the plaza, and keep in mind these are very early, and we're going to develop these and have much more interesting architectural statement than is shown here, but these are trying to show you all the components that we have included. An enhanced plaza area. At one point, this was much larger in our earlier scheme, but now we sort of scaled it back down to what we believe the budget of the $6.3 or so million would produce for this project. Central sort of area for a kiosk, and then a sidewalk leading to the main entrance of the building, the singular entrance that the public would use. And we thought, again, that would be a spot for a grand sort of gesture of a canopy that had some sort of a sweep that would really be a great opportunity for some signage and directing people to go straight towards that stair tower element that now we've stacked vertically that becomes a lantern at night, a real beacon for people coming from Doyle Drive or even coming from under the shopping center connection. Then, of course, you're in the building in a waiting area with some support, which has now been placed to sort of block the views of, you can see where the truck well would be over on the left. The area of the where the existing plaza, the proposed plaza right now, has some existing landscaping. We were going to work with Grissom, Metz, Andres, and try to come up with ways to maybe retain some of that, perhaps relocate it onto a location and use some of that landscaping to extend. You can kind of see that one line there, sort of a bump in the grass. So that's where the building used to be. So now it's much more compact. It doesn't quite form the bridge element that we originally intended, but it still is trying to do that. As you can see, the way the thing is perpendicular to the tracks, it creates this sort of an extended bridge typology that really defines how you get, you know, to the station and over the tracks. And of course, the bridge element. Let me go to the next one here. It's probably a little bigger to see. The bridge element. Of course, we originally had pretty much an all-glass bridge in the design, and this thing suggests a much more modest, a horizontal strip of window, not unlike an Amtrak train that might have a silver metal cladding with a strip of windows that would be sleek and elegant. And as you can see, we've proposed that there's windows on the ends of the bridge so that there would be an opportunity to overlook the shopping center and overlook parts of Birmingham when you pass through the bridge, as well as being able to look down, up and down the track. And then a replica of the elevator and stair component on the Birmingham side. And then, of course, platform. We originally had a linear platform that started at that stair and continued, I don't know, 150 feet to the north. But based on the budget, we're suggesting that we would use some pre-engineered shelters that would be more economical. They would still have some heating elements, infrared heaters that would keep people warm while they're waiting. And we certainly wouldn't use this bus shelter. This is something that I had in SketchUp to drop in there. Something more elegant and glass, I think, would be an appropriate kind of response. So let me show you some more views. This is sort of a detailed view of the bridge mechanism. And again, one of the original ideas was to have this sort of the event of climbing the stairs or using the elevator. And we need to look at this closely. Again, this was done, you know, quickly for the interview process, but we'll need to make sure that this is a very contained and safe building to operate. On all these buildings, we always think it's very important to make these things very open to the outside. You know, these are often going to be unoccupied, so somebody could be coming across that bridge at 1 o'clock in the morning. We want to make sure that it's as open as possible and safe feeling. We want to really avoid, you know, places where people can hide. In fact, with the budget as it stands right now, we're proposing that, of course, the station itself, the center will be heated and cooled and fully conditioned space. But the bridge and the stairs, we believe, and the budget now reflects the idea of conditioning that space for ventilation, but not necessarily heating and cooling it, just keeping the snow out of it. So once you're outside of the building, you would be in sort of a covered stair. I think probably the best example, I don't know if you've seen the Ted Fuller building in Birmingham has a parking structure and a stair that's part of it. And that's just an open, enclosed stair. It's a very elegant kind of way to get to multiple levels of that parking structure. We think that might be a good model to take a look at for how we might enclose the stair. And of course, the elevator has to be minimally heated to make sure the hydraulics work in the wintertime, but it's not going to be an air-conditioned kind of space. And then, of course, the bridge would require ventilation and fire safety equipment. So let me keep going here. I'm kind of taking too long. So these are some area views traveling around. Here you are looking at the platform from the Birmingham side. And I think as we get into this, I'd like to propose moving the station maybe another 20 feet or so closer to the parking. I think we still want to make sure that it's open when you come through the portal from the shopping center and open to the platform, so it becomes a graceful sort of embrace of the plaza, but I don't think it needs to be quite where we've shown it. We originally had the plaza there, and we just took the plaza out. We didn't move the building up. But this kind of shows you that relationship. And as I go directly over the bridge, you can kind of see how it stands now. Again, we think of these forms as being as sculptural as possible, sort of an artful object that's supported by the two masonry elements. Again, the masonry would likely match or be very close to that of the shopping center. And then we would have some, very clear glazing, silver metal, something that would be handsome, a lot like some of the materials that you might see at the Troy High School. Here it is looking north. And again, this is the view that people would get coming into the city from, say, Chicago or from Dearborn. And again, we wanted to make sure that the elevators were very safe feeling, so we're proposing glass back elevators so that you would see those moving up and down to animate the building. And then a window in the waiting room that would look at the southbound tracks. We found it's really important, what I think they call it passenger anxiety, when you're sitting waiting for something and you can't see where it comes from. People want to know, is the train here? Is the bus here? And they're not going to sit there. They're going to go stand outside in the cold to watch for the train. So we want to make them comfortable and make this thing, user-friendly wherever possible. Then moving a little further, this is over the shopping center. You can kind of see that relationship. And again, the plaza for the bus area is relatively simple. Obviously, there are talks in the work that this might become enhanced to become a BRT facility sometime in the future. That's down the road. Right now, we see it perfectly functional for buses and taxis as a great way to.
What does that stand for?
Bus rapid transit. That's something that the city has been discussing now to opt for mass transit in the area, and I think it's something like 35 stations that would be connected by direct connected buses that are articulated. Whether or not that's going to happen, I know, but that could happen at this site. There's space in that plaza that could accommodate that kind of modality.
Is that dialogue be going on, with the bus, with SMART?
I think right now it's someone's vision to replace the Woodward light rail. So I don't know how far along those discussions. I saw it published, and it's actually a common way to provide transit in a more economical fashion because it uses wheeled buses.
You're just saying that we can provide for it.
There's space for it. We're not proposing that it's going to go in here. I've just seen it discussed that there's a potential for that. So this could be enhanced at some days. So this could be Troy's BRT station if that was the case. Again, now I'm going to drop down to an eye level view. This would be if you're passing from the shopping center going westbound on Doyle, driving into the drop-off area or during that bend. So you can see the massing of the building. Again, a brick building with some glass elements to keep it open in the area and trying to emphasize the vertical elements so it becomes, again, beacons, so very inviting kind of look. We felt it was very important to keep the building open for police that might drive by late at night that want to look into the building to make sure there's nobody fooling around in there. Again, the canopy is intended to provide a sheltering element. Again, we had the plaza around the perimeter there, but I think it still creates a great way to have some signage. I've called it Detroit Transit Center. That may not be the correct name at this point, and it kind of gives you a feel for how that can become a welcoming, and I think that really targets your request to have a real memorable sort of human scale plaza. And of course, we would have some flags as part of the plaza as well. So this is looking back at the bus area and the connection back to the shopping center. And again, the sidewalks would be enlarged, and we would make sure that the vehicles are protected from pedestrians by using some bollards to give sense of people's safety along that way. And we haven't shown any new pedestrian lighting. That's something that we're going to have to take a look at, how we make sure that the plazas are safe and the walks are properly lit. So here we are looking at the entry into the building. And again, right where that woman there is standing would likely be the location of the entrance. Under the E in center would be where you'd enter the building at a single point, or maybe slightly to the left, and we would adjust the location of the plaza and the stair. And you can see the grade there, how the train is actually quite a bit up in the air. So that's why we want to make sure that there's a vista from this waiting room to the tracks to the north and to the south. Here we are back in the parking lot looking at what it would be like to park your car and walk in there and bring your dog to visit somebody in Chicago. And so there you get a sense of it. And I think you can start to sense the way this becomes a real gateway to the city and to transit options away from the city. This shows the sidewalk that already exists along the edge of the parking and where we would have that walkway that goes across Doyle Drive at that 45, which we think is important to reinforce for safety, to make sure people will not put themselves in harm's way trying to get to the place. As you get a little closer, this is just walking across that. And here you're sort of directed, when you're walking across that, you'd be looking straight at the platforms where you'd be waiting outside undercover, for the train, so that there's certain things that do line up. So if those are some cool elements, there'd be an interesting vista walking across that way. And then turning again back to the plaza. And we think, signage is always very important in all of our projects, and especially for a building like this. One consideration that we thought would be to actually create a pylon in the plaza that could perhaps include some signage elements that would tell people when the next train is arriving, when the next bus to Somerset Collection, will be leaving, things like that that could inform the public. So we need to develop this. We have to determine how much the budget will tolerate for things like this. So that's going to be a challenge as we move forward on the design. And of course, we're going to have places for bikes and benches in the plaza. And we put something down here. It's not the most artful way to arrange bikes and benches, but we wanted to get something down. A lot of this was a device to make sure that our estimators could take a look at this and have dollars assigned for these things, placeholders. And then as you get closer, here was a notion of how to maybe do some interesting signage. And that could be an iconic element that would help people, direct people to the site as they are going on their trip. This is looking down southbound Doyle Drive. And it's kind of interesting because you almost line up perfectly with the bridge, so it almost becomes a giant goal pole, if you will, that you're heading towards, which I think would be very dramatic as a terminated vista when you're driving down Doyle. Here it is over on the Birmingham side again. There you can get a sense for the platforms. And we need to look at the spacing. Again, we reduced that to 200 feet based on an understanding that we have with Amtrak that's probably going to be doable, and that saves quite a bit of money. And obviously that's going to be the most complicated place to build something in that narrow zone between the tracks and Birmingham. So we want to make sure that we do the essential amount over there. And of course the stair would connect you to the platform, and we would want to keep that open. We'll have to carefully look at how we exit that stair and head to the platform itself. When you get out of the stair, there needs to be adequate room so you're not immediately walking toward too close to the tracks. And with our experience in Dearborn, we know all the clearances that are mandated by distances from the track and zones of demarcation and textured surfaces and things like that have to be applied as we move around. This would be if you're under the bridge itself. Looking back, you can kind of see a glimpse of the canopy wrapping around the cornice to give a cool horizontal slice through the very vertical building. And then the bus area. And then this is kind of a section through that bridge if you're coming across the tracks to get a sense for the scale of that. And we need to look at this exactly in terms of how we're going to support it, what structural elements will be required. Obviously, it's going to be a long truss that's probably going to have some diagonal elements to triangulate the loads. But again, the hope is to keep at least a 4-foot section to give you some nice panoramic views. And then this would be the eye-level view if you're coming in from the train. And you can see we have to put a fence between the tracks so that people don't exit and try to run to their car quickly. They have to use the bridge. It's a requirement. Nobody gets to walk across the tracks. And then this would be from behind the shopping center, showing that side of the building. Not a lot of public would see this unless you're heading back from Home Depot with your wood chips. But here's the the view, and obviously we'd have some windows on that side. And again, we think the form should be simple. This needs to be an iconic structure, not a lot of traditional detail elements. We think the base wants to be a strong element so that we don't have glass going down to the ground. So when they do mow the grass, they're not throwing grass clippings into the perimeter of the building. Things like that need to be looked at as we develop the design. And then this is just that back to that front view, and then this goes to the renderings. We have an in-house renderer that can produce these things to give a little bit more textural quality to it, and you can kind of get a sense for some of the landscaping features and the bollards and the plazas. And as you get a little closer, you can see some of the ideas we have at this point on the glazing, which we need to take a look at, to make sure we have an appropriate amount in for the budget, as well as a way to sign the building. We think this would be a great way to sign the entrance to the city with the Welcome to Troy sign. In fact, maybe we can even put the City of Tomorrow Today underneath that as a way to describe the entrance to the city. So just the last slide is, I think with this design, I'd like to ask your opinion. Do you think we have a starting shot at addressing some of your current concerns? And we know that when you looked at the project before, the design was done hastily to get going on the project. We've had a little chance to study it, and we'd like your input on whether we're starting to take care of some of these concerns that you've raised a while ago.
One little summary remark is that understand that this process we followed up to this date is quite an unusual one for a design project. We've actually shown you a very detailed representation of a design before the project started. So this design, we've attempted to meet all of the 6 criteria you're using, but one of the significant activities we still have to go through is with our other team member, the Tools Clark construction manager at risk. Once they have gone through and analyzed the project in detail for both schedule, constructability impacts, and budget, we will then have to fine-tune what you see visually to make all of that work within the parameters in the council resolution. So things may change here and there, but the basic ideas are being represented.
Well, thank you for an excellent presentation. To respond, I'd like to have our resident architects lead us off. Mr. Tagle, Mr. Stratt. They've been working behind the scenes quite a bit on this project, and I think it would be helpful for all of us if we hear their comments first. Mr. Tagle, could you respond to that, please?
Sure. Well, I've looked at this project for a long time now, and I think you guys have done an excellent job from where we started some years ago, or a couple of years ago anyways. I think it speaks well to the quality of the city, and that it gives a nice introduction, a nice gateway to people coming in here. It's a modern statement, which I think is appropriate for what we're seeing developed in the city over the past few years, and I want to applaud you. You did a good job.
Thank you.
Mr. Stratt, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I'd like to echo what John has just stated. I am very pleased with what I've seen so far, and I think it really is a night and day difference between what we originally was reviewing and what you're presenting to us now. You've satisfied an awful lot of the concerns that we have had. Safety is a very important factor, and the visualization of the transparency of seeing the inside is very important. I would like to make a couple of comments, if I may, or
Please do.
Suggestions as a possibility. I know that you have the waiting area that is being overseen, as illustrated in that photograph there. You can see from the bridge, you can see down on that waiting area, and I know initially you had grass on top of
Right.
you had sod on top of the roof there. I think that'd be an excellent opportunity, at least the waiting area, if you could put something in that area as an alternate, if at all possible, if the budget would permit. Because it's an excellent opportunity to show that we are conscientious in terms of energy conservation, and that's one of the key things that we've tried to do here at the Planning Commission. The only other concern or other possible recommendation I would make is the transparency of your bridge. If at all possible, again, if you could put the glass down to the floor, again, if anything should happen on that bridge, you'd want to have complete transparency.
Right.
If somebody is going to be attacking a woman or whatever, you'd want to be able to see that. So again, I think transparency is very important that you have in that whole area. I know you've done an excellent job with the stairway. I like it. It's not only a beacon, but it's a functional too. So what you've done is very well done. Now, I can only tell you, I really appreciate what you've done.
If I can address those two, you picked up on that. That's why that guy there is looking at the green roof that's
I
not there
saw that.
anymore.
I saw that.
So that was a
I saw
design
that.
feature before. In fact, the whole roof used to be green, but
I understand that, but,
we can look at that. I think there's a possibility that a small portion of the room could.
well, I don't know where you're gonna put your mechanical units, but if the mechanical units are up on top there, you could have patio stones going around, make it a sculpture, doesn't have to be anything real expensive. Good design is not necessarily expensive design, as you know.
We've done a number of buildings with sedum roofs now, so we're familiar with the technology. And in a limited fashion, it's something that I think we can consider, for a small building like this, and it would be a great place to showcase the project.
Exactly.
And obviously, the more glass on a building like this, the better. So I think we're going to work hard to make sure that we maximize it. Clearly, there's the issue of cleaning the glass. The more you have, the more it can get dirty. And that's always an issue, so we have to weigh the maintenance costs and look at that too. So
Versus safety.
and safety, yes.
That is what real,
Yes.
The whole roof too will qualify to contribute to sustainability in terms of the reflectance value of the roofing. So even if we're not able to put grass over the entire area, the remainder of the roof will be specified so that it minimizes the air conditioning load on the building.
I understand.
I kind of envision we're probably going to want to have some sort of a screen wall element for the mechanical. We have to really engineer what the equipment's going to be up there too. It might all be in the room and it won't be a
But you can
problem.
make the mechanicals look like a part of the sculpture.
Right,
I mean, you can make it work for you, not against you.
certainly. All right, we'll certainly take a look at those.
Is there anyone else? Mr. Shecky?
Yes, you mentioned before that the lighting still had to be put in there. That's the biggest concern I have, is lighting, because this is a very isolated area back here,
Right.
especially when you're on the Birmingham side over there, and the tracks are elevated, so you're not going to get quite the good view, I don't think, of people over on the other side when you're at a lower elevation on this side. So I think it's a very dangerous area over on the other side. So I think not only is lighting important around the parking area, where you could have people, where the cars are going to be parking in the area going up to the building, but I think on the other side that really has to be considered. And instead of adding a lot more glass, could there be closed circuit cameras or something like that over there to protect those stairwells and the passageway across the tracks, so that it can be monitored by the people that are in there, because I'm really concerned about safety.
Yeah, one thing, the Amtrak design standards actually help us with the platform itself. They require that for a period of time when the train's approaching, up until a period of time after it leaves, all the lighting on the platform and around the building has to actually double in luminance. So the normal basis for lighting might be what you see in the shopping center parking lot. And when anyone is actually on the platform waiting for the train, it's going to be double that for the period of time till the train leaves. So you're actually going to be very bright in that area.
That's important, but this is not a train station that's going to have a lot of trains coming in and leaving. Right now, it's going to be at a very limited amount of...
6 times a day.
Yes, right, 6 times a day. So that's the reason I suggested some kind of closed circuit monitoring, because I don't care how well lit it is, actually, if there's nobody to see anything going on, there's nobody to witness anything that's, whether it's drugs or whatever it is.
Yes.
That is included in the budget.
It is included.
Closed circuit cameras throughout both sides, on Troy and the Birmingham side, and it will be monitored by Troy Police.
Mark?
And we would coordinate with our police department so that they'd be part of the design process so that they can monitor this remotely.
What about any kind of emergency phone? I know just about everybody has a cell phone now.
Well, we'll work with the police department to ensure safety occurs. They'll be part of the design process.
Yeah, that's real important. And also those shelters on the other side, are there going to be kind of like a bench seating or something? I didn't.
Yes.
I know it's just a rough draft of what you have up there, but and there will be some kind of heat in there.
Yeah, we're proposing infrared heaters and some benches in there. I think if you look at that picture up there, you can kind of see that people in that platform would be higher then, you know, they're not really down in a hole.
No,
so they
they're
would
not-
be
they're
visible,
not-
which is
they're
good.
not- They're not in a hole,
Yep.
no, I realize that, but
But you're right, it does need some light on that side, as well as the plaza, which is not shown.
you're very isolated from help getting there if anything happened.
I think we can do a lot of that economically from the canopy and, of course, you know, from the plaza itself, but we want to make sure that it's very safe.
When you say support, in other words, you're gonna have a ticketing area.
Well, nowadays, when you get on an Amtrak train, you can get your ticket online, or you
Yes,
can
you
actually
can.
buy it on the train, but there'll probably be a booth there where you can put your credit card in there and get your
So
ticket.
you're not gonna have physically people there.
Just a machine, it's a little kiosk.
Okay, so then there wouldn't be anybody to monitor those cameras other than the police department anyway.
Police department.
Let's Steve address it.
So,
Go up to the mic, Steve, so they can record you.
even the kiosks, it remains to be seen whether Amtrak is going to want those or not. And they do have them in some stations, but they're gradually transitioning over or to get away from the kiosk and having more stations that rely entirely on purchasing your ticket online. As far as the closed circuit cameras are concerned, as Mark stated, we would work with the police department to identify those areas where they would want to observe and make sure that there aren't any areas that can't be seen from patrol where they would like to have visual observation from. So that is also part of the budget. The closed circuit cameras are part of the budget, and I don't know if it's detailed enough in the estimate that you have in your packet, but it is part of that budget.
You will have restrooms in it too?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
And those are another concern about monitoring in the restrooms. Because you don't know, you know, if somebody's gonna get mugged, they can be dragged in there, and then there'd be no witnesses at
Yeah,
all.
I'm not sure you can put them in restrooms, but I'm not an expert on
No, wait a
that.
minute now, at least who comes in and who goes out.
Yeah. And that's
Ingress and egress.
right, and we're going to rely heavily on the police department and their expertise. And we obviously, in the City Hall campus, we have cameras around, and probably you don't even notice where they are, but they're there.
Safety is a big item because that is a tucked away area over there. So I appreciate all of the work you put in on it.
Thank you, Mr. Shepke. Mr. Sanzika?
Oh, again, I like to echo our friend, the architects on the quality. I'm just impressed by the graphics. It's totally amazing what you can do today with the drawings and the different views. And it's just amazing. But I do, one comment you had about moving the building closer to the parking lot.
Mhm.
I just think that does seem to be a long way back.
Yep.
From the parking lot to the building entrance. And if you could make it half the distance or whatever, that would shorten the distance, and I think that'd be a dramatic improvement to the site plan.
I think we still want it to be open so that when you come from the shopping center under that arched opening, this wall doesn't block the view of that, but I think a little bit closer is easy to do. You know, it really doesn't matter where it is as long as it's, you know, within reason along that tracks. There are some, you know, the high tension wires and the fiber optics and the stuff like that we're going to look at carefully as we place this. And that might inform the design a little bit, but, you know, we're certainly not
I was
going to.
curious about that, you know, where they are. You know, because I know there are high tension lines and towers in that area, and I just didn't know where they were.
And the high tall stuff is over on this side, but there's buried stuff right here that we can't. That's why the building is set back from.
Let Mike address those ones.
Yeah, as you mentioned, Scott, the high tension wires run parallel to this west side of the tracks here, and there are underground fiber optics that are along both sides of the tracks, as well as DTE overhead and AT&T overhead that run along here. Now those overhead lines are scheduled to be relocated to underground, and they'll follow their same pathway in their 10-foot easement, which is just into the city's property, but they would be underground to avoid.
Aren't there some towers too, Mike? Is there a tower, aren't there towers?
Yeah, there's a tower that
Two.
sits about right in this area, I believe, and then another one that's just down at the other end of the north end of the platform.
Those are pretty tall, so.
Those are very tall, and they're about 40-foot square that sit right next to the the railroad right-of-way, just on the other side of our platform.
But you're saying the north tower is at the end of the platform as it's shown on that diagram? somewhere
Yes,
down
it sits somewhere in this drawing, does sit somewhere right in that area. Now, they are talking about a new service to the old storage facility that sits right in this area. So there was talks in the last discussions we had with ITC of them possibly changing the configuration of some of the towers in that area. And at the time, they didn't really have their full plans for that. And I think they're going to create a substation on that triangular piece of the storage facility property.
Another thing I was interested in, and I know this doesn't show the parking lot and all, but is there going to be long-term parking and short-term parking at the site? Are you going to be able to park your car there for a week and take a train to the airport, for example, or when you come back from Chicago?
Yeah.
Was it designated? Is there enough parking to do that?
How many spots is there?
It's around 300 spots. Does that sound right, Jim? Is it like 300 spaces that we have in that existing parking lot?
No. 170, I think?
Okay, 170 spaces within the existing parking lot, and I don't know that we've gone to the length to discuss if we might have some that are besides
So it
accessible.
comes quite a way to the north.
Yeah, the entire, there's two driveways into the parking lot now. One sits in this area, which would have to be eliminated to accomplish the bus pull-offs that we have, and another that sits down right at the north end of the parking lot. That driveway would remain. So basically, from that driveway to the south,
You can see the parking lot up
Right.
on the screen.
Oh, okay.
That's all we're keeping the existing parking lot.
yeah. So the other driveway sits right in this area here, and so basically from this north end all the way to Doyle Drive, that is parking designated for the transit center. It's not parking, or shopping center parking lot.
The city actually owns that property. It's part of the property which we own.
Right.
And
Yeah, our site starts.
just to expand upon from more of a city management angle related to parking, we haven't really considered short-term and long-term parking, but one of our concerns is that we really want the customers to utilize our parking. Because we did think, well, how can we make money? We could charge for parking, but I think you would have people parking off of our property and into the shopping center, which is just not reasonable to occur. But we'll, as we move along, we'll think about short-term and long-term parking, because that might be wise. People are turning over, they might be closer. And Mr. Chair, as we talk a little bit, I would like the team to really talk a little bit about the complexities of working in a railroad right-of-way and some of what those difficulties are, maybe just so that you become aware of it, because it's pretty amazing the things that have to occur and how it actually raises the price and how much control the CN Railroad really has.
Is there any other questions? Go ahead, Mr. Johnson.
We've got a lot of brick and mortar and concrete, and these buildings are pretty stark in appearance. Maybe you've got some landscaping plans, but if you haven't really considered that, I think that we ought to consider softening the structure with some flowering shrubs, maybe some annuals, and some other kinds of greenery, which is going to soften the approach to this building.
To be honest, this was as a diagram to help understand the components. It wasn't really intended to illustrate any landscape concepts. We're definitely going to take that into consideration. We have money to install landscaping. We are proposing to use, a very limited irrigation or no irrigation on the project, so we have to be careful in terms of how much we can plant that, requires a high level of irrigation. So I think we're going to work with Grissom Metz to really come up with a smart thing. This was one of the earlier ideas that talked about creating something simple and maybe some native grasses that would be an area that would create, when you're waiting in here, you could look out to the tracks and see some cool flowers and things like that would be growing naturally. Obviously, this side we see as a little bit more manicured, probably some shade trees and some elements of planters. And honestly, I didn't draw it. I think the renderings were a little bit more illustrative of the fact that there would be something going on. We do need to take a close look at it. But you're right, it needs some softening. It's right now it's just grass and buildings. It's not going to be just that.
Anything else? Mr. Krantz?
I just want to thank you for attention to detail. I think you really consider the human in your design project here. The idea of sitting at a train station, being able to see the train coming, that's critically important to a lot of people. And then other elements like the raised crosswalk. That's the first time I've seen that. That's phenomenal. That's what I'm saying. Raised crosswalk, both situations. So it's like a speed bump.
Right, exactly.
So it's like, wow, why don't we do that in a lot of other places where where people cross and physically a car feels they're going up. Oh, wait a minute, what's happening here? This is a perfect element. I'm glad you've incorporated that. It's just a super, again, attention to detail. You've done a super job on that. And I like your signs too. And I like the word Troy Transit Center. Just my personal taste. I think I agree with you. That's simple. It's clean. It's right to the point. Multimodal. But I just want to congratulate you. It's a super job. I understand about this is just really an elaborate schematic at this point. The planning and all those other elements that make it pop and really come alive will come in time. But structurally, this is super.
Mr. Evans?
Yeah, great job. I think it's really really coming along. And the only one question I had was, you mentioned that the building might be locked after some hours. And would people who got off a train still be able to use the restroom?
That's more of a management decision as the owner of the property, and we would have to analyze that in the future. But the train gets in there pretty late, 1 a.m. And the purpose of it is to have it available. And there was actually some thought to leaving it open 24 hours. But I think we're really going to have to look close at that and look at how to maintain it, because it'll cost to lock it up and do that. So those exact decisions aren't made.
That's certainly a tunable element too. We can do the best thing we can think of right now, and it can be adjusted at a later date depending on how the facility.
Are the restrooms located close to that?
They're right in this element right here.
Oh, in this border.
Yeah, they will provide the capability to close off the towers and bridge from the building, but then from a management standpoint, the city can decide how it will be open or closed.
Thank you.
Mr. Sanzica?
I would be remiss if I didn't ask about stormwater management.
Water management.
And I don't know if your landscape architect is considered bioswales, or I know you talk about native grasses. And I just, I don't recall specifically how the stormwater runs across the site around, but do they have any plans on?
I believe
this is the only time we have a chance to look at it. I wonder if
right now. Jim, bring it up. I believe the entire site is engineered to use the facilities that are in the front over on Coolidge. So I don't
Correct. The parking area that stormwater system will remain, and that's collected in an enclosed system that goes out to the retention basin. That's part of the shopping center facility. So this site is part of that overall stormwater management system for the site. And this area, we really haven't done that detailed design, but as we work through with Chris and Metz, we would certainly consider those options and make it a sustainable site. One of the features that was taken out of the project is, as we reduced the budget with some of those elements, we had some porous pavements and water reuse and those type of things that we had to remove from the project. But we still certainly want to maintain a sustainable element and keep the site as green as possible.
I think any area that you can eliminate from having to be maintained or mowed would save a lot of money as far as maintenance costs, and I think that's where a lot of different organizations are going, just to try to have those areas as maintenance-free as possible.
Just to piggyback on that, actually the distance between the sidewalk and the building is an ideal location. No, the sidewalk, not the sidewalk.
Plaza?
That sidewalk, no. The distance that you were talking about bringing it forward, okay, in between there, all that grass area would be an excellent location to have something done there that could be a sculptured kind of retention area that he's referring to, not just a excavated area that you traditionally see, but something that could be sculptured.
At the Oakland County Airport, we put in 2 rain gardens that Grissom Metz designed that create is really great.
We talk about definition of rain gardens. Everybody has their own definition of rain gardens. And small bioswale. But anyhow, no, you could really have a nice location there that you can actually emphasize. Again, we're trying to, as on our level here at the Planning Commission, we'd like to incorporate as much as possible stormwater management. we encourage that as much as we can, wherever we can. And that's where Phil is coming from, which is great. We love it.
Go ahead. Mr. Evans?
One of the elements, the sustainable elements that I was disappointed to see that had to go was the geothermal system. And if you move the building this way a little bit, that gives you more area for a geothermal system in the back. The question I had for management, because I heard someone talk about an alternate, when these bids go out, will there be an option for alternates?
Well, I think this is an opportunity to maybe bring the construction manager in to comment on that. I mean, really, and that's their realm.
Thank you.
That's their responsibility.
Sorry.
Don't break it.
I'll try not to. To answer your question, there will be opportunity for some alternates. And during pre-construction phases of this, when we're doing the estimating, we certainly can look at geothermal systems and what their cost impact would be to see whether that's feasible or not. So we can certainly look at that.
Certainly at time of bid too, with the bid alternates, introducing the add alternates depending on how the bid pricing comes in. So you can exercise those.
Any questions about while we're up here, about physical challenges of the building?
Constructability, I think you have some concerns.
Should you give us 2 minutes on that?
Sure, I'd love to. You know, when you look at this project initially, and you see the size of the building and you see the bridge, I think the one thing most people don't take into account or really realize are the challenges of working in a rail corridor. And you know, we have to keep in mind safety first, always, not just with the patrons using the building, but how are we going to construct and build this in a safe manner. And in addition to the 6 trains that come in and out, you also have freight rail that uses this corridor as well. And there's really no set schedule for that. And when we're building this project, everything that's done within that rail corridor, we have to have full-time representation, not just from ourselves, but from the railroad and full-time flag persons on site. We have to shut down our operations a half an hour before and a half hour after every train comes through. So it's quite a scheduling and sequencing challenge. And
only when you're working in the railroad.
Within 25 feet of it. And so it's
when you're building the towers, you have to do that?
Yes. Yes.
Once that tower is in the right of way.
And I'll add in addition to that a couple of the other challenges with this particular project. We talk about the Detroit Edison lines that are going to be relocated here. There's a set of switch cabinet down here that feeds the entire Midtown Square Mall. So that's something we need to take into account in our operations. Also, you know, when you look at Doyle Drive and the amount of people that use that access the mall and the public, we have to build this in such a manner that people can still utilize the road and use it. We have to build it safely to keep people safe. The other thing, just as a note, we talked a little bit about the high voltage, the 125 kV high volt wires that are on the other side. Those wires are physically within 15 feet of that tower. And so we have to coordinate with ITC to physically de-energize some of those lines to be able to safely build that tower. And there are shutdown periods. If you have ever worked with high voltage wires, when there's only certain times of the year you can shut those down. And so that's one of the first things we're going to be doing as we work with Newman Smith and HRC, is to get those stakeholders all together and try to come up with a great plan how to attack that. So those are some of the basic and the largest challenges that we'll have to deal with.
Thank you. Is there any questions? Mr. Taker?
What do you anticipate your construction schedule is?
Right now, it's anticipated roughly to start in October, and that's pending completion of the design, and really the biggest challenge there is approvals. Approvals from the FRA, approvals of the documents, approval to start agreements within the railroad for us to be able to work in that corridor. And the duration between 10 and 12 months. Okay, and some of that will obviously be weather dependent. Some of that will be the final how we're going to put this thing together and the nuts and bolts. You know, one of the things, this bridge that we already are starting to look at is how we can set a crane up and pick that in one piece. I say the structure of it, not the physical finishes of it, because we'll never give you a quality product by doing it that way. But how to pick that bridge and where to stage with the elevation changes. So that's just part of the logistics that we need to look at in constructability.
And there's also a premium attached with winter construction as you start. If you're starting in October,
There is, but I will say the bigger premium is how to minimize the amount of time we can work in the rail corridor versus the cost of that operation.
Does freight traffic slow down at all during the winter months, or it's not at all weather dependent in that respect?
One of the challenges with freight is they'll never really give us a set 100% set schedule. It's fairly consistent. It's as they need it, it comes, and we get the call and we have to respond and react. So.
Are you going to be able to get rid of the balls that are up there on the high-tension wires?
Well, I wish I had power over that, but I don't.
Isn't that for the airline?
Those for the aircraft.
Aircraft.
Yeah, the airport, proximity to the airport.
That's for the aircraft.
Our goal here really is to maximize giving you the best product we can possibly do within the budget and the restraints that we have. So.
Any further questions or comments? Mr. Shippey?
One thing, just looking at this, at the picture, in the wintertime, if we have real heavy snow over on the Birmingham side, if you wanted to get a snow thrower, you would have to go up and across and then down. And if there was something you needed on a continuous basis, would there be any, because you have to keep them platforms clean, would there be any possibility of attaching a small shed or something to the structure somehow so you could keep maintenance equipment so you didn't have to haul it back and forth?
I think you'd run it up the right-of-way of the railroad. We really can't build anything on the platform, and we don't have much room behind it to build anything. So you would be bringing the equipment in and out.
So you have to take it across, up and down the elevators?
No, bring it across on the right-of-way on the other side from a location. You wouldn't take it over the bridge.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
It's kind of deceiving looking at the drawing here. All right.
Okay, anyone else? Yeah, I see. Mr. Lim, we'll get to you in just a minute. You want public comment? I won't ignore you, sir.
Thank you.
So any other further questions from the commission? Comments? All right. Well, I think this is a much more functional design. I think this is a big improvement over what I've seen. This fits the site much better, and probably moving the waiting area a little bit closer, I think probably preferable to me, but I think you've done an excellent job with this. And really like the design of the bridge as a nice focal point. This is a much more cohesive, coordinated, functional project, and I think you've done an excellent job. Thank you very much. If there's nothing else, we'll move on to public comment. And since I saw your hand, you've been so patient, Mr. Lim, you need to come to the microphone.
Do you want hand up? I have to slow down.
Okay, we'll wait for you. We'll wait for you.
I realize that the speakers' legs shouldn't take granted. First, I want to congratulate your planning commission. I have said to Mr. Taggy that you have been doing what I find a lot of laymen don't do, is that for finding functional criteria for how something should be done. I just listened tonight. I agree with the gentleman. The glass should come down at the bridge. By the way, my name is Paul Sealand. I'm an architect. I've worked on mass transit. I was with Office, did the subway system for Washington, D.C., as well as one downtown, and through the whole development all the way from Pontiac to Detroit. So I'm very familiar with everything what the gentleman said about construction. So that was excellent. This is a vast improvement, not a schoolboy drawing that you didn't have to worry about pragmatics of security and safety. So I thought that was fantastic, because I've done high-rise also at Skidmore as a Merrill, and you worry about fire stairs, someone getting raped. And I say it out loud, in Birmingham, they had a concern about in the bathroom, in the elevators, people urinating. I'm just being blunt, like the North Garage, and people doing things they should not be doing. But you cannot, we call it legislate, right? So I want to congratulate what you've done. I do have some comments to give you some help. The scheme is excellent. The building should be moved forward. We're not in California. So that I'm glad we don't have all this stuff, real Plaza before, that this is not a city hall, and you are in a back door part of behind Kroger's. I go by there every day. And so by doing that, you, not only for people like me, handicapped, wheelchair, pulling suitcase, and in bad weather, we're not in California, they can get there, okay? I hope that it was the suggestion I made earlier working with Fleming, that the elevators are 6 by 8. I went to the Detroit DIA, and the architect, English famous Michael Graves, blew it. Because when you put the chair inside and someone in, you are squashed. You cannot move someone, even if someone with a suitcase. So I request that you put a 6 by 8 elevator going up and down, okay? And somehow it's not, it's glass or something, if someone doesn't do something funny in there. The gentleman point about putting plants, I will not agree with that. I've worked on the American Embassy for Venezuela, Federal Reserve Bank, B-2 bomber facility. You put plants, you should not have places next to a building like this where someone can hide. We had to do in Venezuela, we had to make it look public and friendly. But we prevented someone bringing a truck or something next to it with nitrate, like they did at the Kansas City building, and devastated, or someone nearby in the bushes and hide and break into a building. Okay? So I like what they have done. They have moved it, simplified it, and in general, they are also with it. I know the site in detail, make it easier because you're not only coming to the train, to the parking, but also you can take advantage of the Midtown shopping experience as part of the total experience of traveling. So I think that was excellent. In general, it's a very, I give it an A+. I can now support the scheme and tell other people that it's done excellent, okay? The building is simple, no games, and all these open security. And then one last thing, this is being frank. I taught Michigan, Lawrence Tech, UD, and helped out Cornell. We speak of this building as a gateway. Well, the one thing's missing in all these pictures, and they are very prominent, is the electrical towers. To make a point, you will not find the Arch of Triumph in Paris, which I've been to, and others, with high tension wires around it, or the Washington Monument. So it's going to be very critical, not because these pictures are deceiving by not showing what are we doing with those towers. And I would like to know also that on towers with the voltage, if they happen to break, we don't have the whole building electrified. Right? As architects, we're licensed for health and safety. So I recommend that we be very pragmatic, like the gentleman asked what the balls are. Obviously, we don't need to have a plane crash. Those things are very practical. Okay? I think I can cover it pretty well. The building should be moved forward, take advantage going to the gate, Doyle Road to it, so that if you had to walk the distance like I have a bad leg now. I can't walk like I used to. I won't even go up like a high-rise building anymore, like the I-beam building. I'd be a long way down to the ground. So just imagine, we had at Lawrence Tech to teach them, put people in wheelchair for a whole day. And my wife teased me. You looked at the code book when you were an architect, but you sure changed now. because you can't do it. I hope I help.
Thanks, Paul. Thank you, Mr. Lynn.
Good idea.
Thanks, Paul.
I just got a couple of questions.
You have to talk.
You have to talk.
The video won't be able to record you.
Won't be able to- I think, my name's Ted Wilson. I think that the lighting, especially at night, if we could use some colors at night, it may make something more iconic when you're coming in at night, especially if it's 1 o'clock in the morning, which would be interesting. Other thing, in the Mr. Stratt's idea of the green roof and the waiting area, if that can't be done, maybe we could put some skylights in there to where we could reduce the energy load during the day, even where we wouldn't have to have as many lights inside of it. And the question I've got for the team, the support building is almost, looks to me like the same size square footage as the waiting area. What all is going to be in there besides for restrooms and air handling equipment?
That's it.
That's it?
That's it. That's what it takes.
I mean, is it going to be half of the building? 1,000 square feet for that?
It's about half, yes.
It's going to be that much, okay. Thank you.
Okay, is there anyone else? All right, we'll close public comment and bring it back to the table. Before we close this evening, is there any further comments from the commission? I'm not going to poll anybody individually, so I'll get the opportunity to speak. So, all right, once again, then, thank you for an excellent presentation. And let's move forward. This meeting is adjourned.